Hey everyone, it's another installment of Inside Indiana Overtime. It's not overdrive, as our friend Mike Miller at the Herald Times likes to think, but it's overtime. I just want to make that clear. I'm Alex McCarthy from Inside Indiana. This is our special guest for today, Robby Howard from the Indiana Daily Student. He's the football columnist, and he's been around for this whole season. He's watched just as we have. But this is your first time on Inside Indiana Overtime. What's it like?
I'm glad to be on Overtime. Glad I'm not on Overdrive.
Exactly. Overdrive is reserved for Mike Miller. But we're here at Memorial Stadium, obviously, after watching a kind of crazy game, back-to-back games that are just kind of out of control, high-flying offenses. And again, like the last one in Michigan, Indiana is on the losing end. They lose 42-39 after leading. After being down 22, scoring 26 unanswered, and then giving up a last touchdown. Just a really strange ending to the game. I mean, Indiana had a chance. They were in the red zone. Actually, they were inside Minnesota's 10-yard line with a chance to take the lead in the last 30 seconds of the game. Fumbled and just ended it in kind of a...
And Tevin Coleman didn't even realize he fumbled. It was a lateral gone wrong in every meaning of the word, and Tevin Coleman didn't realize that was a live ball and
just watched a Minnesota linebacker scoop it up and they lose the game. But I mean, in general, Robby, what are some of your thoughts from tonight? There's certainly a lot to talk about.
Well, if I'm Kevin Wilson, I'm talking about how IU still manages to even be in the game at the end. You know, and there is a lot to be said for that, to be honest. I mean, IU was down, 35-13 at one point, and it looks like, they're just going to really get blown out. It's something that we've seen before in the past, but they didn't today. They didn't get blown out. They came back, like you said, they scored 26 unanswered points and managed to make this huge comeback. You're up 39-35, and then you have a massive defensive breakdown, which you give up a 50-yard touchdown pass to Minnesota. That was a big problem, but you still didn't really feel that bad about it because you're going to get the ball back with over 2 minutes remaining, and you knew that the IU offense had it in them, and they did. They marched right down the field. They were running the ball. IU ran the ball very well tonight. They had, 227 total yards rushing, which is very impressive from this team. Yeah. That's something that we haven't seen since the Bowling Green game. But then, it comes down, it looks like IU's going to punch it in at least, even Mark Murphy said this, he said, I at least thought we were going to be playing in overtime. Yeah. At a minimum, thought we were going to be playing in overtime. And then this play call happens, this little swing pass, and turns out that Tevin Coleman wasn't beyond the line of scrimmage, so Nate Sudfeld had thrown it, behind him, making that a fumble and a live ball, and that's something that Nate Sudfeld realized, but Tevin Coleman didn't, so he didn't go after the ball. Minnesota did, and that's the game. And it was an odd game and a fitting ending with that, I think. It was just the weirdest ending you could have in which it looks like IU's right there. It looks like IU's finally going to turn the corner and win the game, and they don't. Yeah,
it was a game of a lot of bizarre moments. I mean, we've seen that over the years from Indiana. Just a lot of really strange endings to games. And I think you wrote about this in your column, just about how Indiana, and actually Nate Sudfeld talked about this after the game, about we've just got to make plays at the end. We play really well. We have this huge comeback, but we just have to finish the game. And it's something that we've seen a lot, in the Kevin Wilson era, in the 2.5, 3 years that Kevin Wilson's been here, and even before. I mean, near the end of the Bill Lynch era, of just some kind of games that are right in their grasp, and sometimes literally slip right through their fingers. I mean,
like tonight, the game literally slipped through their fingers tonight.
Yeah, it literally fell out of Tevin Coleman's hands. But like we said before that, there are a lot of reasons to be really excited about this Indiana offense, as there always are. At least in the second half. In the first half, they were pretty stagnant. I mean, their only touchdown came after Mark Murphy forces a fumble deep in Minnesota territory. And they punch it in from there, but they score 13 points in the first half. Trey Roberson, I think, is only like 8 for 18 or something like that, with 80 yards passing, where he looked a little off. Both he and Kevin Wilson actually used the phrase "out of whack," where there's not a specific, it's not like there's something specific he was doing. He was just like a little bit off from time to time. And I mean, I know there's, in the press box, every time that Roberson would come out for another drive, we were just kind of surprised. I mean, what were you thinking going through that first half as Roberson kept coming out after being ineffective?
Well, to begin with, I still think that Nate Sudfeld should have started the game, regardless. Sudfeld said after the game, he said that he didn't have the best week of practice, that the coaches told both him and Trey this morning that Trey was going to get the start. Nate said he wasn't really surprised, but I was, because even though Trey had a better game against Michigan, he might have had a better practice week, I think we've still sort of, in general, throughout the course of the season, we've seen the team respond better to Sudfeld. That's just the way it's been for most of the season. And I think that overall, Nate Sudfeld still gives you the best chance to win a football game, and that's bottom line when it comes down to. And, it's not really fair to second guess at this point to say, well, what if Sudfeld had come in after the first quarter? Would stuff have gone differently? That's not fair, and it just doesn't really make sense to even talk about that or draw that comparison. But, going back to it, I was baffled, to be honest, that Trey Roberson was still coming into the game, because I thought that we were kind of seeing him struggle. The offense really wasn't doing anything at all. And before, during the season, we've seen Kevin Wilson sort of have a quick leash on his quarterbacks. And if one is struggling, then usually the other one goes in, and usually that's worked pretty well. And tonight, he gave Trey Roberson a full half, which I think is much more than a quarterback who's struggled has gotten in the past this season.
Yeah, no kidding. And the two quarterback system has, it's certainly paid its dividends in certain ways. There have been times where they use Roberson really, really well. In the second half, Roberson was on the field for one play, and it was an option play that ended up as a 55-yard Tevin Coleman touchdown run.
It was a perfect play for him.
It was perfect, yeah. And IU has been able to, it seems like they have made progress throughout the year, starting Sudfeld, because like you said, I feel like they think that he gives them probably the best chance to win in terms of a guy who plays most of the game at quarterback. And then they've figured out, I think, really well how to use Roberson in certain situations. Against Penn State, I think he scored on like the first 4 plays that he was in the game in some way, where they would put him in, in a perfect situation. Yeah, in a perfect situation with a really good play call, and where he would, I think he scored a 2-point conversion and a couple touchdowns. I thought they've been kind of figuring that out. Today, they go back to Trey Roberson for the first time since, I think, the Navy game, in terms of starting a game. And it just, other than a play here and there in the first half, it just didn't look like the offense was quite, on the same page necessarily, or quite clicking on all cylinders. And yeah, I was also surprised to not see Nate Sudfeld come in a little bit earlier. A couple of us in the press box were saying, like, is he suspended for a half? Is he hurt? Is there something going on? And there wasn't. It was just the coaches decided to go with Roberson for a full half, and then obviously Sudfeld starts the second half, throws for almost 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a couple of gorgeous deep balls. I think a 40-yarder to Shane Wynn and a 30-yarder to Cody Latimer, and a couple of other really nice passes too, where those are passes that really we've seen Trey Roberson, overthrow, underthrow, just kind of miss. So it'll be interesting to see, as it is every week, who they start at quarterback next week, whether it's going to be Sudfeld or whether it's going to be Roberson. We do know pretty definitively that both of them are going to play for the remainder of the season. But speaking of the remainder of the season, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about bowl chances and about what this game was to those bowl possibilities. Just real quickly here at the end, what do you think about? Can we see postseason football from this team? Do you think it's still possible?
By statistically speaking, it's still possible. IU still has 4 games remaining,
right?
So, and they only need to win 3, so they get 1 loss in there. But the problem is you're playing on the road at Wisconsin and at Ohio State, and you have to win one of those. So that becomes a really, really tough task. I wrote in my column previewing this game that this was a must-win game for IU in terms of bowl eligibility.
Yeah, it was hugely important, and if you win this game, you basically just have to win your last 2 home games. If you lose this game, which they did, obviously, you have to steal a game from Wisconsin or Ohio State which
The
it's
one
gonna be
positive
tough.
thing to say about that is IU has played Ohio State really well the past couple of years.
Yeah,
surprisingly.
they played them close.
You know, they've lost the past 2 years, but they've actually played really well. And so somehow maybe that's still an option. I don't see them winning at Wisconsin at all. Wisconsin has just dominated IU as long as I've been a student here.
That's true in both football and basketball.
Yeah.
They've just had their number, where it's there just seems to be a mental block there. I mean, regardless of what goes on in Wisconsin, it just seems like Wisconsin always figures out a way to beat Indiana. But next week, I believe it's Indiana's back at home against Illinois. We've got to be like the team here. Let's take it one game at a time. Let's not look forward to Wisconsin or Purdue even.
Yeah, because if you lose against Illinois, then it really is done.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. You have no shot really.
Yeah.
So we'll be here again. All the Inside Indiana guys are going to be here. The IDS guys obviously are going to be here. I don't know if we're going to have overtime or overdrive next week. We'll see what happens. I know Mike Miller's been kind of walking around out there looking at us.
He's a mopey guy.
He's jealous. He wants to be in the videos. So we'll see what happens there. And we're also going to see what happens, obviously, on the field. We'll be there. Stick with us through the week. Basketball regular season basketball is going to begin. There's an exhibition game
Friday.
Yeah, there's an exhibition game Monday. Tons of stuff going on at Inside Indiana. So stick with us. For Robby Howard, I'm Alex McCarthy, and you have a good rest of your weekend.